Chapter 2, Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was one of the greatest and best-loved comedians of the 20th century. People understood him and identified with him even though the movies in those days were silent. Charlie Chaplin was born as Charles Spencer Chaplin on April 16, 1889 in Victorian London. His parents Charles and Hannah were music hall entertainers, and some 30 years later, Charlie grew up to entertain the whole world. Hannah's marriage to Charles was over when Charlie was 3.5 years and his brother Sidney was nearly 8. Hannah was shattered, but she didn't give up. Life became more difficult for her and the boys. Gradually, Hannah was forced to sell all her small treasures, and then even the things she needed. Existence could have been pretty bad if she had not brought magic to it. The shabby room they lived in, she transformed into a glittering stage. She sang and danced for her little audience of 2 and acted out plays for them. Somehow she not only managed to keep Charlie and Sidney clean and warm, clothed and fed, but she made up little treats for them. The occasional herring for breakfast. Hannah's efforts to keep them decently dressed were not so successful. She made clothes from her old theatrical costumes. The boys were teased a lot as they went about in the streets in their strange, oddly cut shirts. However, they did not seem to mind. When money was short, Hannah showed the boys how to find entertainment without it. She would sit at the window watching the passers-by and guess at their characters from the way they looked and behaved, telling tales to Charlie and Sid. Sometimes she would mime all that she saw in the street below, her hands and face describing it to the boys without speaking a word. Charlie took in her skills just as he took in the sights and sounds of London, and went on to use them all his life. When he was a multi-millionaire and a world-famous actor, he would say it were his mother's skills and his storybook childhood that had given him the perfect training for his career. It seems to me that my mother was the most splendid woman I ever knew. If I have amounted to anything, it is due to her. Without her, Charlie would have become just one more child lost in the poverty of Victorian London. There was simply not enough money coming, and Hannah had to do something. In desperation, she decided to go back to the stage. She was afraid of the unforgiving music hall audiences, but her talent was all she had to offer. All her worst fears came true when her voice failed miserably. Poor Hannah's struggles to carry on singing were drowned in whistles, catcalls, and boos. She fled from the stage. The manager, listening to the uproar, was desperate. He saw little Charlie standing in the wings. He was better than nothing. He grabbed Charlie's hand and led him to the footlights. Charlie was 5 years old. The sight of this small child staring out at them brought out cries of laughter from the audience. But Charlie had been brought up with professionals and performance. He stood firmly and sang a song, a scene from the movie The Tramp. The audience was very pleased and threw coins onto the stage, demanding another song. When Charlie coolly announced that he would go on once he had picked up all the money, there was another great shout of laughter. He was enjoying himself, and he went on dancing and singing until Hannah carried him away from the stage. In 1910, Charlie went to America with Fred Karno and his company, Silent Comedians, where he was a big hit. 3 years later, he joined the Keystone Film Company. The same year, cinemas became very popular. Keystone was one of the companies bringing out short films to meet the demand. The director, Mark Sennett, found a sure way of saving money on sets and on extras. He would take his crew to a local event and let his actors roam among the crowd. This is how Charlie's second film was made, at a children's car race. He was told to fit himself out with a costume and make a nuisance of himself at the track. He chose a bowler hat slightly too small for him, an ill-fitting tight jacket, outsized pants, enormous boots, and a jaunty little swagger cane. The little tramp character made his very first appearance on the screen. Even Charlie could never have guessed how famous and long-lasting this character was to become. But right from the very first moment, he knew just how the tramp would behave. A man down on his luck, but bravely trying to maintain dignity. He remembered the poor clerks of his childhood, who chalked their collars, inked the bare patches on their sleeves, and cut neatly the frayed edges of their shirts to look respectable. He remembered the way even the most poor men, women, and children always wore a hat, however bad its shape. The tramp had shown the way, but it was after acting in many more films before Charlie decided on his final character. For the time being, he played all sorts of characters. The Tramp movie was a big step forward. In it, the character better known as the Little Tramp, whom most people remember when they think of Charlie Chaplin, put his first proper appearance. The whole world was to take the character to heart. Small and shabby, a strange combination of child and man, gentle, sad, mischievous, brave, and always a survivor. Somehow, Charlie had found a character with whom everyone on earth could identify with. His sadness and his type of comedy crossed every boundary. Despite being silent, movies were silent in those days, everyone could understand him. Thus Charlie became the tramp, the eternal loser who always wins in the end. He bridges the gap between the rich and the poor, the successful and the losers. He stands as the little man who wins in the face of all obstacles. Charlie gives dignity to the less fortunate. He gives them a chance to laugh at themselves. He gives them the hope that they could win in the end. It is this quality that gives the tramp universal popularity by breaking down all social barriers. By now, Charlie had become famous and was producing his own films. One of his famous films in which the little tramp appears is The Kid. He found the perfect actor to the role in the 4-year-old Jackie Coogan. Charlie directed Jackie, who gave a wonderful performance. The tale of the tramp and the kid touched everyone's hearts, and the film was a great success. It was shown in 50 countries. The film tackled a social concern which had deeply affected Charlie Chaplin, the treatment of abandoned children. He had never forgotten the fear he had felt when he had been taken into an orphanage. The tramp was a character that appeared in many films. In The Gold Rush, City Lights, and Modern Times, among many others. Charlie was now the greatest and the best-loved comedian in the world. He was rich and famous beyond his wildest dreams, but his personal life was filled with troubles. His mother's death in 1928 was a big blow. Hannah had been very ill, but she and Charlie had been laughing a day before she died. Watching her suffer had been almost too much for him. When she died, he was standing by her bed and was relieved that death had taken away all her pain. He remembered her songs and stories and cried. In 1938, Hitler's madness was firmly taking hold of Europe. Charlie himself watched the events in Germany and Spain and grew more and more concerned. He made a film called The Great Dictator, in which he tried to warn the world about the dangers of Hitler's popularity. After the war, the fear of communism swept through America. Charlie Chaplin was accused of being a communist, especially after his film Modern Times. But it had only been Chaplin's reaction to the 5 million unemployed people during the Great Depression. Chaplin was proud of his friendship with men like Paul Robeson, the famous actor, and Bertolt Brecht, the playwright, both of whom were communists. When Charlie went to London for the premiere of his film Limelight, he was disallowed re-entry to the United States. Thereafter, he settled in Switzerland. After a life of incredible hard work, of great triumphs, and great sorrows and trials, Charlie Chaplin died in his sleep on the Christmas of 1977, surrounded by his family members. Adapted from a story written by Pan Brown.